I did everything right and they indicted me.
And I don't know what the I'm doing. Antifa!
Hello and welcome to the Katie Halper Show. We have such a great show for you today. We speak to two lawyers, but they're interesting, spicy lawyers. They're not boring and dry lawyers. And one of them even got into a spat with Vice President JD Vance. But before we talk to them, as always, please do like the stream. And we love it when we get subscribers, and we're over 400,000 subscribers, and we're so grateful to you for helping us get there. But give yourselves the gift of subscribing, because you definitely don't want to miss any of these great additional streams that we're doing. We're doing a bunch of live streams that we don't know exactly when they'll be, although I do think you'll want to tune in on a Friday, because we are probably going to have a really exciting live stream with someone whose name rhymes with Schmerby Schmorbin, or maybe rhymes with Jeremy Corbyn, this Friday. We'll make sure to let you know about that with a post on YouTube. But again, that's why you definitely want to subscribe. You hit subscribe and then the bell, and that way you never miss any of these exciting additional live streams that we're doing. We've been doing really great ones. We did one with Venezuelan reporter Andreina Chavez, who joined us from Venezuela. We also had the great intellectual Vijay Prashad and the great journalist Jose Luis Granado Ceja, based in Mexico. They joined us right after Maduro was kidnapped to share some insights. And we also had Mohammad Marandi join us from Iran. So again, do yourselves that favor and hit subscribe and then the bell so you don't miss any of these additional ones. And also, please, if you haven't already, do become Patreon supporters, because we literally could not do this show without your support. And also, this is a great gift to yourself, because if you join at the $5 a month level, you get access to extended and bonus interviews, behind the scenes content, and early access. If you can't swing the $5 a month, you can still support the show at $1 a month. That way you give yourself the gift of being able to sleep well at night, knowing that you're making the show possible. But if you do get to do the $5 a month Patreon level, you won't be disappointed, because you'll get full access to the Mohammad Marandi interview that we did, the Moeed Perzada interview that we did, and so many more. And again, that's at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Also, if, by the way, you're listening to this as a podcast, please do rate and review us. And we are trying to hit 10,000 subscribers on TikTok, and we're almost there. So if you haven't already, please do follow me at KTHalps_. That's letter K, letter T, HALPS _. Okay, so we are bringing on our first guest, Jenin Younes, who is a Palestinian-American attorney and the National Legal Director of the ADC, which is the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. She's also the co-host of the podcast Previously Prohibited. She describes herself as canceled by the left for her COVID views and canceled by the right for her Palestine views. And Jenin recently did get into a spat with JD Vance, which we will discuss. But as a reminder, we did have Jenin on before. She is representing a 73-year-old Palestinian grandmother named Janine Ali. And we actually had on both of the Janines. We had them on together. And here is just a refresher and a reminder about the case. Here is a great write-up press release from CODEPINK, and Janine Ali works with CODEPINK and organizes with CODEPINK. She doesn't work for them. She's just someone who attends their protests. So I'm going to read this press release that was posted by CODEPINK. 73-year-old Palestinian-American grandmother targeted in politically motivated lawsuit. Washington, D.C. Janine Ali, a 73-year-old visibly Muslim Palestinian-American and grandmother of 11, is once again facing legal harassment, this time through a federal lawsuit filed by Kim Sumrali, director of Betar, D.C., a pro-Zionist organization that describes itself as loud, proud, and aggressive. This marks the third attempt to prosecute Ali, despite her being acquitted in criminal court. The allegations stem from November 13, 2024, when Ali was joining CODEPINK and other groups to advocate for a ceasefire in Gaza. As she was making her way to the cafeteria of the Dirksen Senate office building to meet up with the group, Sumral accused her of grabbing an Israeli flag tied around Sumral's neck. A criminal court judge, after reviewing evidence and testimony, found Ali not guilty. Nevertheless, her accuser is now attempting to relitigate the same facts in federal court, where the burden of proof is lower. Betar U.S., whose social media has promoted Make Gaza Jewish Again videos, has a history of disrupting peaceful pro-Palestinian events and staging counter-protests to drown out protected political expression. This lawsuit is a continuation of that effort, a blatant attempt to weaponize the courts to silence dissent. Equally troubling is the lawsuit's dangerous claim that criticism of Israel's government and its flag, a political symbol of a state currently responsible for mass civilian deaths in Gaza, amounts to anti-Semitism. This false conflation seeks to criminalize political speech, even though many critics of Israel's policies are themselves Jewish. It is an effort to erase the critical distinction between opposing a government's actions and attacking religion. This is not about justice. It's about suppression. We will continue to stand with Ali and with people of all faiths in support of peace, justice, and nonviolence. Ali's legal team is seeking to have the case dismissed, arguing that it constitutes a clear abuse of the judicial system and a violation of her First Amendment rights. We must send a message that our courts cannot be weaponized to intimidate activists or silence political expression. And as we will get into with Jenin Younes, not Janine Ali, Betar, the far-right pro-Israel group, is going to end its activity in New York because Attorney General of New York says that an investigation found that Betar U.S. engaged in widespread persecution of Muslim, Arab, Palestinian, and Jewish New Yorkers. So without any further ado, here is Jenin Younes. So Janine, welcome back to the show. We had you when you were talking to us about Janine Ali, who you were representing. Actually in a case against Betar. And we want to have you on to talk more about Betar because that's been in the news. But then I didn't even realize that you really blew up because, I saw you were on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and I just assumed that was the Katie Halper show bump that does so much for the world. No, I didn't think it was that, but I didn't realize that it was because of a spat that you had with none other than JD Vance.
JD Vance saw what you wrote and started going at you. Feel good?
Actually, it kind of did.
Did it really?
So before we get into the JD Vance, just tell us about the latest when it comes to Betar, because a lot of people were very excited and they were like celebrating and patting Tish James on the back as the Attorney General of New York for going after them and disbanding them. But what actually did happen with Betar, and what is Betar?
So, Betar is basically, I would describe them as kind of a Jewish supremacist terrorist group. They openly endorse violence. They use violence. So the AG entered into a settlement, the New York AG, with them. And the findings were documented. Now, to be fair to Betar, if one can be,
they shouldn't require that. Yeah.
They, part of the settlement terms were like, they weren't admitting these were true. These were the AG's findings, which I, trust probably have some merit. So they basically found that they had instigated acts of violence at pro-Palestine protests. They had taken credit for stabbing someone, for beating people. They encouraged their members to bring weapons. They had some really horrendous tweets that are First Amendment protected, but, in the context of everything, pretty awful. Or even not in context, but, saying that not enough babies in Gaza had died, that kind of thing. We demand more blood. So just really atrocious. I think it's fair to describe them as a supremacist and terrorist group. So they entered into this settlement, which people were celebrating. And I would say my take wasn't super optimistic. I guess the settlement I would probably describe best as a warning. It was basically saying you agree not to violate the law, which like everybody already isn't supposed to do.
Right.
So you're not supposed to engage in acts of violence against people because of their race, religion, ethnicity, which they had done. Yeah.
That's
and then it gave them a suspended $25,000 fine, or 50. Actually, I think it was 50, whatever, but it's suspended. So if they don't violate the law to the AG's knowledge for the next 3 years, they never have to pay it. They have to check in with the AG once a year to tell her that they didn't do anything wrong, which I'm sure they'll do. So it's pretty a slap on the wrist, a warning, something like that. It doesn't really have any teeth. Right.
Okay. And how does this relate, if at all, to the case that you were working on with Janine Ali?
It doesn't relate directly. So actually, the Betar woman sued Janine, not the other way around. She was, I believe, the head of the DC chapter. I don't think she is anymore, but she was for some time. It would be interesting to know if one of their tactics is falsely accusing Palestinians of crimes,
Right.
Since they clearly don't have any morals or, they're willing to go to really extreme lengths to persecute Palestinians and people who advocate for Palestinians. The findings actually also included that they had engaged in discriminatory acts against Jews who were anti-Zionist. So I wouldn't say there's a direct relationship, but the fact that the plaintiff in our case who's alleging that Jenin assaulted her, which I don't think happened, but even if it did, it was a minor pull on her Israeli flag cape.
Right.
I mean, it sort of puts it in context who these people are, the
Right.
fact that they shouldn't be trusted and the fact that they embrace violence.
Right. So in other words, their claim, right, was that she had like assaulted the Israeli flag and that was an act of anti-Semitism.
Yeah. Anti-Semitic discrimination or something. Yeah. Under a federal civil rights law. And the judge actually found for her in a preliminary motion. So that was pretty shocking. The AG's findings at some point might help us to sort of show the judge, this woman is portraying herself as like a persecuted little lamb who wasn't doing anything wrong. When I believe she testified at the criminal trial where Jenin actually got acquitted, and she, claimed that she had nothing against Palestinians, that she's,
Right.
So this might help us down the road with kind of convincing the judge that he has the wrong impression of what's going on.
Right. That this grandmother, Janine Ali, this grandmother who has like no criminal record and is a very nonviolent protester whose crime is being Palestinian.
Yeah.
Right. If we're being honest.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will persuade the judge that the person from the vile Jewish supremacist group, which is bad enough that the Attorney General of New York went after, did anything about it, which, as we know, given how easily people are smeared as anti-Semites, for Tish James to do that means like there is a lot of evidence, because you're not going to go after a group like this unless you have smoking guns, so to speak.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
So that's exciting. And what is the status, by the way, of the case with Janine Ali, to the extent that you can talk about it? I don't know if you can.
No, I can talk about it, but basically nothing's changed since we were on here. We're still waiting for the judge's ruling. He is taking his time, which could be a good sign. I don't like to make predictions about decisions because they can always catch you by surprise. But the fact that he's taking a long time and we asked him to reconsider his decision means maybe he looked at some things and recognized that he got it wrong.
Right. I mean, and this can, I assume, only help, right? Literally only help. What just happened with Betar?
We haven't entered it into evidence because it would sort of be inappropriate at this phase. We sort of concluded briefing at this point, but we could enter it into evidence if the case goes on. I mean, we're asking him to dismiss the case, so hopefully he just dismisses it and then we never have to deal with any of it. But if he doesn't, then we have this. Yeah.
Right. Well, so you're also in the news because you made an interesting comment about the Renee Good case. I'm just going to show this. You tweeted out, I'm a former defense attorney and currently a civil liberties attorney with no political dog in this fight. And to be clear, I just want to say briefly that you are someone who's been on you're very consistent. So you side with the traditionally described left and you just side with the traditionally described right. Depending on the issue, as opposed to the ideology, right? So you've been aligned with both of them because you're pretty consistent. So because of COVID stuff, you were aligned with the right, and then because of Palestine stuff, you've been aligned with the left. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, right?
Yeah,
but I would
that's
say
that's sort of a good framework.
Shorthand for it. So I'm a former defense attorney and currently a civil liberties attorney with no political dog in this fight. I watched the video at least 10 times from different angles and at different speeds and waited to offer an opinion, which I still reserve the right to change if additional information changes the calculus. And by the way, this, of course, is about the Renee Good killing. Okay. It is very clear that the officers instigated the confrontation. The woman initially tried to wave them past her. ICE officers have no authority to search a U.S. citizen or arrest her unless there's probable cause to believe she's harboring undocumented individuals, not a contention here. A woman surrounded by masked armed men who have shows her steering wheel is turned to the right, clearly an attempt to leave without hitting anyone and steer clear of the officer standing toward the front of her car. That officer had time to step to the side, which is where he was when he shot her. Even a real police officer would not have the right to shoot at her for trying to flee. This is well established in the case law. Deadly force may not be used simply to prevent someone from getting away. That's so important. Given that the ICE officer had no law enforcement authority to begin with, and the video footage shows she was trying to escape a perceived threat not to kill anyone, the crime is all the more inexcusable. I'm praying for the victim's family, especially her children. I'm also praying for all the conservatives who are so unprincipled and lost they are excusing this terrible crime and gloating over a death that will leave 3 young children motherless because of the victim's politics. Okay, well said. Very. Oh yeah. Okay. Now let's take a look at how JD Vance responded. And again, I guess you have JD Vance to thank for your appearance on.
I'm very grateful to JD.
Yeah, right?
Vance.
Okay, this is preposterous. First of all, she's not waving the officers through and has no right to do so, even if she were. She's waving another car through before the officers approach her car. Second, the officers are not randomly searching her. They are approaching her vehicle because she is violating the law. Namely, she is obstructing a lawful enforcement operation. You're not allowed to walk up to or drive up to people who are enforcing the law to make it harder for them to do their jobs. Third, this defense attorney is drawing a meaningless distinction between an ICE officer and a real police officer. Again, you're not allowed to interrupt a lawful enforcement operation, which is exactly what this woman was doing. Fourth, the officer didn't discharge his weapon to prevent her from fleeing. When he discharged his weapon, she had pointed the vehicle at him and pressed the gas. Not true. He discharged his weapon in self-defense, and other angles of the video showed the woman clearly hit the officer with her car while accelerating. The gaslighting is off the charts, and I'm having none of it. This guy was doing his job. She tried to stop him from doing his job. When he approached her car, she tried to hit him. A tragedy? Absolutely. But a tragedy that falls on this woman and all of the radicals who teach people that immigration is the one type of law that rioters are allowed to interfere with. By the way, that's not actually what radicals do. They often, I'm sure, object to many types of law that we think are, I'm not talking about you because you are a practitioner of the law. I'm saying that for lots of people who are critical of immigration law, we're also critical of all sorts of laws. Just like it was Martin Luther King Day this week. I mean, that's kind of the whole shtick, right? Is that there's justice and that there are laws. But anyway, so what is your response to this JD Vance response?
Well, he gets a bunch of things wrong. So first of all, really, what proceeded is actually irrelevant. The real question is when he shot. But just to sort of paint the picture, I think they don't have, ICE officers do not have authority to enforce state law. So like traffic violations or anything. Now, if she was like significantly obstructing their ability to do an immigration enforcement operation, that would be different. But like your car jutting out a little bit into the roadway is not. And then like the way they behaved, going up to her car, being very aggressive, I would be frightened if something like that happened. She was actually kind of nice to them, as a later tape showed. Her wife was being like a little bit obnoxious, but whatever. None of that actually matters. So, I mean, for a justification defense to work at trial, and in any context, if you shoot someone to death, this presumption is you committed murder, and you can prove otherwise if you can show that you were justified in doing so in self-defense or defense of third parties. But the question is, from a legal standpoint, when you use the deadly force, did you reasonably believe that you were at imminent risk of death or serious physical injury and that you needed to use the force to stop it? So there's several problems with his story. First of all, even if he thought she was coming at him with the car, I doubt police officers are trained or law enforcement officers are trained to think that if they shoot at someone who's driving a car, that's going to stop the car from coming towards them. I would think that if someone's driving at you, what you're trying to do is get out of the way, which he clearly did. He was out of the way. By the time he fired the shots, you can see that his feet are planted on the left-hand side of the car. So, even when the first shot is fired. So, and her wheel is turned away. The fact that she might have hit him is irrelevant. I don't think she actually did hit him. I think there was his own cell phone footage came out a day or two later, and some people say it proves she hit him. I didn't really see that. I think he dropped the phone, and that's what made this sound. But even if she hit him, that's not a reason to shoot someone. As I said, someone fleeing is not a reason to shoot. And it's very clear. So from a defense attorney standpoint, I would say there's no jury that's going to acquit him, at least no fair jury, unless they're just being illogical. But maybe I'd tell him, if you really don't want to take the plea, I might be able to get you first on that first shot. I might be able to create reasonable doubt on that first shot. But those second and third shots, no way, because you have to prove the deadly force was warranted for each use of it. And he's clearly on the side. Now, I think it's pretty clear he was on the side for the first shot. But some of the grainier videos, let's say you could just make that case, maybe. There's no way he's getting off for the second and third shots.
Okay, so legally speaking, you can break those down and say like one of them was defensible. The second two weren't, though. Is that?
That's not my position. My position is that all three weren't. But yes, you could. I mean,
theory, one can distinguish.
Yeah, I could see it. Some defense attorneys might be like, I can create reasonable doubt with that first shot. Right. Like I can say it's not really clear where his body's positioned, and it's the prosecutor's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt once you raise the justification defense. So maybe I can do that. But I'm never going to be able to get you off for those second and third shots.
Right. Got it. Yeah. So that's interesting. So okay, this makes sense. If I'm shot 3 times and the first shot is when I'm holding a gun, then I drop the gun, I'm shot 2 additional times. Obviously, those are different things. Yeah. Again, I'm not saying that applies. I'm just like going into my head about like, interesting law school things that.
Yeah. This is all like, yeah.
Well, you know what I find fascinating is that, and again, you're someone who's very principled. You're you probably find yourself in like both in funny, what is it? Politics makes for strange bedfellows. So you're in like, you got a lot of bedfellows, I guess. I don't mean that makes me sound like I'm promiscuous or something. That's not what I mean. But like, you're probably used to being comfortable with certain groups and not comfortable with certain groups, or like comfortable with a certain group on one issue and not on another issue. And what strikes me here is that I guess I'm used to like conservatives being really pro law and order and all lives matter, but it does seem like at some point, aren't they supposed to be small government, and isn't ICE kind of like a violation of that principle?
Yeah, I mean, and there are some who are being principled I've seen, but they're kind of few and far between. And I will say, I mean, I'm getting used to it. I was a little shocked with the hostility on this issue. And I think there's something really dark going on with a lot of conservatives. Some of the reactions I thought were really horrific. And another thing that I think is important to note is that the administration's defense of this immediately after the fact, without, conducting any kind of investigation. And I believe Kristi Noem, Vance, I think Trump called her domestic terrorist within hours or an hour of the shooting. Like, that's not, no matter what happened, high-ranking government officials should be saying, a woman was killed, we're going to conduct an independent investigation. If they were at all honorable and cared about having like the public's trust at all. But these reactions are insane. Calling her a domestic terrorist is, I think, insane. And some people I actually know are insisting this is domestic terrorism. And that's been hard for me to process and maintain respect for. Like, even if you think the officer reasonably feared for his life and so it was okay to fire the gun, I don't see how anyone could look at that video and say that's domestic terrorism. That's just bonkers.
So I'm wondering, like, do you think that maybe this is a bizarre thing to ask you, but do you feel like being Palestinian prepares you for being principled in a weird way? I know that sounds weird. I don't mean to I'm not like essentializing you as Palestinian, but like, you must be so used to people making exceptions and being hypocrites, right? Because I feel like that is so common when it comes to Palestine. So maybe you're like extra immune to that.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I think like early on, I recognized that. It was, I think that's fair. Another thing you said that stood out to me was caring about social justice in these issues involves recognizing that a lot of laws are not just. And, I kind of work within the law. My dad always said that everything the Israelis do is legal. They just like make up some law to be like, you're violating the whatever, so we can demolish your home. He actually had a sister-in-law who I forgot the exact details, but she couldn't get into Palestine. I think her parents had been Palestinian, but she was born in Jordan or something because they had been refugees. And she married my dad's brother and couldn't get into Palestine because of that citizenship issue. So she ended up buying a Dominican Republican passport for like $100,000 or something, because that was the only way you could get in if it was like not another Arab country. She could go live in the West Bank. So she bought the Dominican Republican passport for $100,000. Then the Israeli authorities found out about her and they created a new law saying that like you couldn't buy a passport from another country to live in the West Bank. So it's like everything they do is technically within the law, but we all recognize how unjust those laws are.
Right. Yeah, that's really important. What else do you feel like people need to know about? I mean, just kind of throwing you the final, it's a, what is it, dealer's choice about what we spend the last few minutes talking about, because it could be anything from Gaza to Venezuela to Iran.
Yeah, well, something I'm paying a lot of attention to now is not in one of the categories you mentioned, but I would say I think this is going to be a really big issue. Pam Bondi was just speaking with Miriam Adelson and the Israeli-American something council, making it clear that they're basically going to devote DOJ to punishing critics of Israel. And we're seeing also really, I would say, an uptick in this. There was an incident in Miami Beach. Now, obviously, this isn't the federal government. It's a state or city. But the police showed up at a woman's house because she had posted something critical of the mayor's position on Palestine. And I always, I think these people are all working together. By these people, I don't even mean Zionists. I mean like these governmental entities. So the fact that it's a city authority rather than the federal government doesn't make that much of a difference to me. I think they all get like a blueprint. So I think we're going to see a real uptick in attempts to suppress pro-Palestine speech or criticism of Israel. And I'm, that being my job as fighting that stuff, I'm keeping a close eye on it.
Wow. Yeah. That is, again, they're really just saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a shocking video. I don't know if you saw it.
Is that your account?
I refuse to answer questions without my lawyer present.
So we're just trying to see if it's you, because if we're not talking to the right person, we want to go see who the right person is.
Okay, how can I help you?
So pretty much it's just a statement that was made as far as,
verbatim, it says the guy who consistently calls for the death of all Palestinians tried to shut down a theater for showing a movie that hurt his feelings and refuses to stand up for the LGBTQ community in any way. Even leaves the room when they vote and on related matters. Wants you to know that you're all welcome. Clown face, clown face, clown face. 3 days ago.
You don't know if it was you?
I'm not going to answer whether that's me or not.
Okay.
The concerning part, and not concerning for the person who's posting it, what we're just trying to prevent is somebody else getting agitated or agreeing with the statement. We're not saying it's true or not.
Understood.
That guy who consistently calls for the death of all Palestinians, that can probably incite somebody to do something radical. That's all we're here to talk about. And we wanted to get your side. If it was you that posted that, I would think to refrain from posting things like that, because that could get something
I appreciate your concern. I appreciate you coming out here.
Okay?
That's it?
That is it.
Okay.
I'm going to maintain my amendment rights to not answer the question about whether or not that's right. I hope that's understandable.
All right, we appreciate it.
Thank you
Yeah,
as
have a good
well.
day, okay?
You as well. Thank you. Take care.
They were basically like, you said something that might make somebody angry and then they might act on it. Like, you can't show almost everything everyone says on social media makes somebody angry.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think it also just speaks to how much impunity they have, because they don't cover up stuff, right? That they would be covering up if they weren't so used to being coddled.
Yeah.
And so used to getting their way all the time. So it's in some ways it's kind of useful, hopefully. I mean, things would have to change so that they're not immune anymore and they don't have such impunity. Yeah, at least in, historically, the history books will show that they were in the wrong. And hopefully things are changing, right? Like as we speak, at least in the public opinion, if not in
public opinion. How that's reflected by the ruling class, I don't know. And there was a really bad decision in Mahmoud Khalil's case last week, which makes me very nervous.
Yes. Yeah, can you update people on that? Yeah,
I'll try to keep it short. So it's a Third Circuit decision. So that's the appellate court in the New Jersey area and that region. And they they didn't reach the merits, which means like the crux of the First Amendment issue. They didn't say it was okay that the government tried to detain him for a speech or anything like that, which would be worse, but it's still a bad decision. So they said that the federal court didn't have jurisdiction over the case because he had not exhausted his immigration appeals. So, and that is, in practical terms, a really problematic decision because immigration courts are not independent. They're part of DOJ. They're part of the executive. The judges tend to be extremely deferential to the government. So it's kind of, I would say a lot of them are kangaroo courts. Some of them in the Northeast are better. Like, that's why they really wanted to get Mahmoud Khalil to Louisiana. That's why they try to take them all to Louisiana to get better judges there. And his immigration case is in Louisiana. So he has a really bad judge. He's just been rubber stamping everything the government does. So it's very important that people have recourse to the federal court system. That's what it's there for, through these habeas petitions. And the court, by saying that you have to exhaust your immigration appeals before you can get jurisdiction in federal court, is going to have really severe practical implications because it can take years to go through the immigration court system. So that means someone could be in ICE detention for years before they have the ability to challenge their detention in front of a federal court. And like the whole point of habeas petitions is that you can immediately get relief from federal court if you're being wrongfully detained by a state or another kind of court.
Right. Wow.
So that I'm sure the Zionists are just extremely excited about that decision. It's now given them a lot of leeway to imprison people in ICE detention for their speech, and those people won't be able to get relief for a long time.
Wow. That's really disturbing. Yeah.
It's really scary. The case is not getting as much attention as it should have.
Yeah, I know. I wonder why.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad you brought that up because honestly, in the overwhelm, I mean, I think I just answered my question, which is that there's so many things that are happening, like just within that realm. I'm not justifying it, but even just now, I didn't have it on my list of things to ask you about. I think we are in such a state of overwhelm because of what's happening that it's understandable, but we do have to keep talking about these things. So
yeah, for
why
sure.
it's so important that you do the things that you do. And well, Janine, this has been wonderful. Let us have you on soon again. That sounds like I'm saying a Jewish prayer or something. I don't even know. I don't really know prayers in general, any religion, but let us now. What is that? Is that Christian? Honestly, I just know it from the Prince song.
Oh, yeah. You're asking the wrong person. My parents were atheists, so I don't know anything.
Same with mine, yeah. What are you originally? Like, what's your, whoever the last religious?
My dad was raised Muslim.
Okay.
And my mom was kind of like, her parents were actually non-believers. My mom's father was actually a German Jew. I might have mentioned that to you before, who had fled Nazi Germany.
Oh my God.
He was he didn't really like Palestinians much. And I think she was a bit of a contrarian and married a Palestinian.
That's hilarious. Oh my God.
I'm teasing her if she watches this. I'm joking, Mom.
Wait, so who is that? That's your mom's?
That's my mom's father. And then my dad's Palestinian. So, he was raised Palestinian Muslim. But by the time he came here, he sort of, I don't know. He met my mom. She was super secular and had kind of convinced him there was no God. So
that is so funny. Wow. That's a fascinating story. Yeah. We'll have to do another interview with your whole family. With the
my dad would love to.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And you still have family in Palestine now?
Yeah. My dad's entire family lives there. So he has 9 siblings. Yeah. His parents are dead, but and a couple of his siblings live in Jordan, but they're mostly there. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, Janine, again, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That was a great interview with Jenin Younes. And remember to like this stream if you haven't already. And also, please do subscribe so you don't miss any additional live streams. And now we're bringing on another great guest, another lawyer, James Carlson. He is an immigration and civil rights lawyer based in Brooklyn.
Hey, Katie, such a pleasure to be back. Good to see you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for coming on. You are such a great person to be talking to right now. I would like to say you're going to give us a lot of comfort as a lawyer who's involved in immigration and civil rights. I'd love to say you're going to give us a bunch of tips about how we don't have to be worried about our civil rights being violated. We don't have to be worried about people being grabbed off the streets and disappeared. Sadly, I don't think that's true. But I do want your insight, analysis, and maybe you do have some tips, even if you can't stop the apocalypse that's facing us. Wow, I sound really like a real downer. But tell us what you think the most important things for people to know in terms of what is happening in the world of immigration, civil rights, the police state, Peter Thiel, all those great things. The techno-fascist state, I believe, is how you've described it in the past.
Yeah, I think that's just about right. I mean, unfortunately, I don't have a rosy picture to paint for you about the prospects for reform of immigration enforcement, but I do, I think, have room for optimism to share about where we go from here. But, I think the important thing for people to know really is that for the past 30 years or so, immigration enforcement has sort of been one of the main spaces where the American state has experimented with essentially how to do fascism in the 21st century. And that's been through the expansion of sort of technologies for surveillance, of detention centers for mass detention and indefinite detention in the case of immigration, and all these other sorts of tools to sort of manage, surplus populations, quote unquote, and, people that are hard to bring into the fold of what I guess I would describe as the capitalist project. And what we're seeing now, I think, is now that we have a sort of mask-off fascist at the administration who's sort of unapologetic about these motives, we've really seen it ramp up in the last year in terms of both expanding detention, deportation, outright violence. And now what we're seeing in the last couple of weeks in Minneapolis is sort of the imperial boomerang of these policies come to not just immigrants, but to the greater population. And I think that has rightly sparked a lot of increased energy in the sort of grassroots movement. I'm saddened that it took the death of a white woman to produce this level of an outrage, because other people have been killed by ICE in the last month and several months under extremely similar circumstances. But this has been going on for a very long time. And, it unfortunately seems to wane when there's a Democrat in office, even though, Bill Clinton was responsible for sort of creating this infrastructure of immigration enforcement and mass detention and hyper policing of the lives of, migrants. And we've seen it expand over basically every administration since then. And now there's just, $170 billion have been allocated to ICE over the next 4 years. 22 new detention centers are being built. Things are going to get worse before they get better.
Okay, interesting. So before we get into what's happening right now, can you elaborate on the role of the Democrats, and particularly on Bill Clinton, in creating this apparatus?
Sure. Basically, there was an immigration reform, omnibus bill passed in 1996 that basically created immigration enforcement as it exists today, in terms of increasing penalties for people who are here without authorization, subjecting people to what's called mandatory detention, which means that they have to be held in immigration detention if they have, minor crimes on their record and other things like that. The increased policing of our borders, which was, with exceptions, has not always been really a thing in the United States. And even before, in the 80s, even conservative economists like Milton Friedman were talking about how immigration was a net benefit for the United States. And it's been sort of this new Democrat strategy of appealing to the center, scaring people about the threat of immigration. I mean, all these things are sort of fictions, right? Migrants are far less likely to commit crimes than citizens. So that really started in the 90s. September 11th happened in 2001. ICE was created shortly thereafter. And now it's led us directly to this place today, where things are as they are. And also we talk a lot, I think, about ICE being out in our streets, snatching and grabbing people, kidnapping people. Obviously, this is outrageous. What doesn't get as much attention is what's going on sort of behind the scenes in the area where I work, the courts, and the way that, pathways to lawful status have been really gutted in the last, especially the last 2 years. There is a Biden-era policy called the Circumvention of Lawful Pathways Rule, which basically means that anybody who crosses into the United States without authorization, in the way that many, many people have for time immemorial, no longer have a pathway to asylum and other forms of humanitarian relief. They're expected to download this app formerly called CBP1, that basically you register, you wait online, you're supposed to present yourself that way. There's a million reasons why people don't want to go through that process and want to just go seek asylum immediately. Those people are now completely, essentially, with exceptions, cut off from having any sort of way to write their status and live here as, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, etc. So that is something that what happened at the end of the Biden administration and really teed Trump up very well to then take that and run. There's now a lot of other new sort of legal policies going on here. A big one I deal with every day is there are these things called asylum cooperative agreements. So basically now everyone who's seeking asylum in the U.S. Instead has to contend with attempts by ICE and the courts to deport them to a third country. The countries we have these deals with are like Honduras, El Salvador, Uganda. Who knows, what they're being offered in exchange for taking our refugees. But yeah, essentially, there's single mothers, trying to get their lives together here. Instead, they're risking being shipped off to a continent that they've never been to before. So it's a very depressing time in the immigration law space. A lot of practitioners are kind of struggling to figure out what to do here. It's seeming increasingly clear that the courts aren't coming to save us. That thankfully was something that happened more in the last Trump administration, that some of these really wild policies were getting overturned. That has not been the case as often here. And something that's been very sort of scary to hear or to see is even when the federal courts have attempted to overturn these Trump policies, Trump has given directives for the immigration courts, which are not, Article 3 courts independent from their executive run, their administrative courts. So he's been directing them and ICE to ignore these federal court orders. So, for example, there was a decision put out by the Board of Immigration Appeals, which is sort of the big governing body for the immigration courts, so basically reinterpreting our immigration laws as they've existed for decades and decades, and saying that anybody who's in the United States without permission is considered an arriving alien, which is legal jargon to basically say that they are not eligible for bond. If they're detained, they cannot be released until their court process is over, which sometimes can take many years. It's so backlogged right now that people aren't getting hearings till 2029. So people are really sitting in indefinite detention with no prospect to be released. And a federal court, dozens, let's put it modestly, of federal courts have overturned that because it's so egregiously unlawful and not based in the Immigration and Nationality Act. Finally, there was a class action a couple months ago that put an injunction on this nationwide. And the Trump administration has directed the courts to ignore this injunction and continue to refuse to grant bond hearings to people who are in detention. So this is what I mean when we're actually seeing fascism play out, and the separation of powers that in theory has served as checks and balances on abuse of power and mismanagement are now being very quickly eroded. And another thing that's going on in the courts is that friendly judges, some of the better judges who are more likely to grant people's applications, are getting fired. And I'm seeing this all over the place. There's chaos in the courts every morning when I'm waiting for my judge to show up, and half an hour later, a different judge shows up who's scrambling to figure out what to do because the judge who was supposed to be seeing my hearing was told that morning that they're no longer employed.
Wow. So is there any they're just at the discretion of how does that work?
They serve they're appointed by the president. They serve at the president's pleasure. I'm not sure exactly who at what position, puts the job termination order in, but it seems pretty likely this is coming all the way from the top, and that Stephen Miller and his ilk are combing through grant rates. I mean, we were doing a lot of speculating early on about what the basis is for this. It seemed like sometimes it was the people who used to work on the pro-immigrant side at nonprofits. They were some of the first to get fired. But really now it just seems to be like the judges who are the most likely to grant an application are the first to go. And I've heard judges comment off the record in hearings saying that, they don't want to hear this because they don't want to lose their job. Or some of the older judges saying, well, I'm going to get fired anyways. I might as well just grant this application.
Right. Wow. And can you just return to that distinction that you made that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, the kind of administrative versus independent judicial system? Or
Sure,
probably
sure.
messing it up, but
Right. I mean, not to go to like civics 101, but there's three branches of government, right? There's the executive, the president, there's Congress, and then there's the judiciary. Immigration courts are not under the judiciary branch. They're not, it's called Article 3 of the Constitution, judges. They are administrative agencies. So they're essentially just career civil servants who are appointed by the president. Courts are held in, sort of like 30 by 30 linoleum boxes without any of the bells and whistles or accoutrements of federal court. Also, obviously, most people probably know you don't have a right to an attorney. So there's just far less due process protections in these courts. And you're dealing with judges, especially now, who are just getting hired, who have no immigration law experience, who are getting brought over from some other agency and have no idea what to do except obey the president's commands, which I think is not an accident.
Right. So we're going to get into some, I want to show some video clips. And one of the reasons I really enjoy listening to you or appreciate your insights is because I think you have a more nuanced view of how politicians work and how our kind of two-party system works. Because I think that, there's a difference between Trump and the Democrats, but there's also a system through which the Democrats obviously enable Trump. And there is a level of discourse. I think there's a big difference at the level of discourse. And I say this a lot, but I feel like there are two kind of poles, and we should be honest about it because discourse isn't irrelevant, right? I think it creates a climate of fear, but it's also not the only thing. So I think, you have Trump saying these extremely offensive, scary things, and also making policies that are scarier. I think that Trump 1 was, I didn't downplay Trump at all, but I do think that Trump 2 is scarier in a way that wasn't well, you could predict it the first time especially because in theory now he's only has one term left. But I want to, I guess, we can put a pin in that, but I think this will be coming up to our discussion, the way that the Democrats and Republicans work hand in hand, but also the way that there is a difference, because I don't want to pretend that they're the same either. So let's take a look though at some clips. Here we have JD Vance speaking about the immunity for ICE agents. Let's take a look at this clip and then I'll have you respond to it.
So I wish the state officials in Minnesota would investigate why you have so many people who are using their vehicles and other means to actually interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation. The precedent here is very simple. You have a federal law enforcement official engaging in federal law enforcement action. That's a federal issue. That guy is protected by absolute immunity. He was doing his job. The idea that Tim Waltz and a bunch of radicals in Minneapolis are going to go after and make this guy's life miserable because he was doing the job that he was asked to do is preposterous. The unprecedented thing is the idea that a local official can actually prosecute a federal official with absolute immunity. I've never seen anything like that. It would get tossed out by a judge.
Okay, and obviously JD Vance is someone who went to not only law school, but Yale Law School, right? Which is like the best law school, right, by all accounts. And you don't get grades there, I've heard.
Apparently.
Yeah. So tell us, what is JD Vance getting right and perhaps wrong in that clip?
He's pretty much getting it all wrong here, right? So there are protections for federal officers under their supremacy clause, but there's huge exceptions for egregious misconduct, for people who deviate from their duties. The idea that he's just never heard of a federal officer getting charged for misconduct is kind of bizarre. And I don't think that's really grounded in law rather than ideology. That's what I mean when I said at the beginning about sort of mask off fascism. This idea that you can get, shot 3 times point blank by an ICE officer and there's no legal recourse for that. And then they label you a domestic terrorist, post-mortem, is precisely what fascism is when you have these brown shirts who have, sort of no oversight, no accountability. And I think it's a very, dangerous moment we're living in where, the attitudes of basically everyone in power is good. We're glad this happened.
Right. And, they like to call Renee Good a domestic terrorist, but can't you easily define what the Trump administration is doing as terrorism? Maybe not easily, but can it be argued that they are engaged in terrorism?
The problem with the terrorism designation, and we've been dealing with this for 25 years, right, is you can call anyone a terrorist. It's a political designation, right? It's saying, I don't like you. and sort of it's like a thought terminating cliche where, okay, this person's labeled a terrorist. We don't get to ask any more questions. But I think, part of why this label is so attractive for them is because it's like precisely a method of criminalizing grassroots activism, right? Renee Good was in her car as an observer. Some people have been using their cars to blockade traffic, which is, a legitimate protest technique. I've done it myself. I think it's this idea of saying, well, they keep wanting to invoke Antifa. There's this, executive order talking about designating Antifa as a terrorist organization. It's not that they can't comprehend that people, organize from a bottom up way. It's that sort of concept is like directly threatening to the sort of world they're envisioning. And so I think this attempt to label people as Antifa, as domestic terrorists, as things like this is a way of shutting down, public access to, on-roads to engaging in activism and organizing your communities. I think what we're seeing in Minneapolis, in Chicago, and LA, and these in New York is precisely the antidote that we need for this sort of moment, which is really horizontal organizing of people gathering their communities together in signal chats or neighborhood hubs, having these, community forums to discuss a sort of people's response to these moments. Because what we're seeing is the Democrats are completely, I won't even say incapable, unwilling to really take the steps needed to protect not only migrants, but everybody in our communities. And so it's this sort of horizontal organizing that's occurring in all these cities is the biggest threat there is to a sort of the fascist coup that we're watching play out right now. And, I don't know if people are familiar with the Prairie Land defendants in Texas, but this is a really good example of there are 18 people right now facing felony domestic terrorism charges for essentially, being in an ICE protest. Someone was arrested for having subversive literature zines in their car. And they're all being tied to someone who allegedly shot at some ICE officers. But again, these are like associational crimes, right? It's the idea that you were at the same protest as someone else. And so you're all part of this terrorism conspiracy. And this is, what fascists do.
So we have, speaking of Democrats not doing enough, perhaps, let's take a look. We have a clip that I know you had commented on from Cory Booker, Senator of New Jersey, Democrat, obviously. Let's take a look at what he had to say in this video that he released on his YouTube channel.
We must do more. The tragic death of Renee Good has brought into clear spotlight so many of the things the Trump administration is doing to make our communities less safe. But one of the most alarming crises are issues of training and accountability standards for ICE officers. The Trump administration has cut the training down from 5 months to about a month and a half. They have eliminated age requirements and are hiring recruits as young as 18 years old. They're putting people into training before their background checks are even complete. And so when you see people cut corners, people die. I'm continuing to lead new legislation that will bring further high professional standards and accountability to ICE officials. We must also set minimum training standards. We must ban the hiring of anyone affiliated with hate groups. We must hold agency leaders accountable. We must require every federal officer to wear a body-worn camera during public-facing enforcement actions and require that footage be preserved so that the truth can't be hidden or destroyed. What Donald Trump is doing is undercutting the strength of our law enforcement. He is diminishing and diluting standards. He is taking actions that are wholly unacceptable to the safety of our nation.
Okay, so what's wrong with that, James? Isn't that encouraging? Isn't that just what we need?
I honestly don't even know where to begin. My first reaction when I see proposals like this, which is the exact same thing we saw in 2020 during the George Floyd uprising, is this proposal for more training, more body cams. And really what they're saying between the lines there is we want to give ICE even more money, which is a just, woefully inadequate response to this moment. But also because we know that these measures don't work, right? When we talk about more training, we're talking about how to do violence more efficiently. ICE's job is to do violence. And when we talk about body cams, Renee Good was being filmed from the officer who shot her's own body cam, as well as multiple other sources. It did nothing to protect or rein them in. And this is what we saw again after 2020 is way more funding to police departments for body cams, for these programs, the expansion of cop cities across the country, like the one in Atlanta, that are essentially just like paramilitary training grounds for waging war against protest movements, right? So this is, when you say that the Democrats and Republicans are working hand in hand or hand in glove here, that's exactly what's happening, where they're trying to create a more efficient, less politically volatile ICE rather than reforming or abolishing ICE as it ought to be. I would take it a step further and say the Democrats never will, take meaningful steps towards reining in or abolishing ICE because, essentially, this is a necessary condition for the moment that we're in right now, right? As the economy continues to get worse, as climate migration continues to increase in the years to come, there is a real structural need within capitalism to have a way to sort of remove people from the equation, to detain them, to commit violence against them, to deport them. The two parties are essentially in bed in this project of having a monopoly on violence over the people, right? And I think the concern here is how to make this politically acceptable to those people, how to boil the frog rather than sort of showing all their cards as Trump is doing now. I think it's really important that if and when this administration is over, you said this is last term. He doesn't seem to agree. I think we lost that outrage during the Biden years. And we have this sort of, we get lulled back to complacency. But the problem is that this machine continues forward. I don't think the Bookers of the world are coming to save us. I don't think that the Jacob Freys and the mayors are really coming to save us in this case. What we've seen, hearteningly so, less so in Minneapolis, but and certainly in Chicago, there was some really effective on the ground activism going on where people were blockading the staging areas, the courts, the hotels where ICE was operating out of, and it was the Chicago police that was being sent to break up the protests and essentially allow ICE to do their jobs. When we have this fidelity to law and order, quote unquote, what that really means is protecting the fascists rather than protecting the people.
Well, speaking of fascists, let's take a look at, a real fascist, and that is Stephen Miller, whose Jewish family has basically disavowed him, pointing out that they themselves came fleeing, as refugees, and had they not been allowed into the United States, would have been killed. Let's take a look at him talking to Jake Tapper.
Definition, that's true. Jake, we live in a world in which you can talk all you want about international niceties and everything else. But we live in a world, in the real world, Jake, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. These are the iron laws of the world that have existed since the beginning of time.
But in terms of day-to-day operations in Venezuela, that is Acting President Rodriguez, right? It's not some sort of American emissary.
What I'm saying.
And what's fascinating about this is that, here he is talking about Maduro, but this could easily apply to what we're seeing in Minneapolis or wherever. Right. So I'll just keep playing this. But speaking of the imperial boomerang, okay.
We'll keep going here, Jake. So I want to say what I'm saying, and then you'll follow up. But what I'm saying is just one level above that, which is that by definition, we are in charge because we have the United States military stationed outside the country. We set the terms and conditions. We have a complete embargo on all of their oil and their ability to do commerce. So for them to do commerce, they need our permission. For them to be able to run an economy, they need our permission. So the United States is in charge. The United States is running the country during this transition period.
If that's true,
obviously that doesn't mean that President Trump is setting the bus fare schedule inside the country.
So
doesn't mean that President Trump is assigning the K-12 curriculum in the country.
The indictment that...
how much of this really, again, the first couple seconds at least of this really could apply to Minneapolis or to Venezuela, right? But this might is right that we see both abroad and, I think with the Democrats, you see it abroad very explicitly, but you don't see it as much domestically as you do with the Republicans, right?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, not to let the Democrats off the hook there. There's certainly ways in which we do see Democrats go after internal dissent in ways that are very alarming. But yeah, historically, both parties have been very much engaged in American imperialism and resource extraction and setting or staging coups over countries with unfriendly governments and socialist governments. Sort of the wildest part of that clip is just saying it so explicitly. But it's almost even harder to watch Jake Tapper feign confusion and offense, because this has been American foreign policy for literally hundreds of years. And yeah, I think the real we are really seeing the imperial boomerang in action right now, where these tactics are being deployed very aggressively at home. And it's being done in a way that it's sort of never been done before, because it's being enabled by not just technology, but the technocrats, right? So the Republicans right now are working hand in glove with Peter Thiel, and I guess less so Elon Musk now, but Thiel's corporation Palantir is sort of at the forefront of a lot of the sort of government surveillance infrastructure that's being built out, where they use the software called Immigration OS that basically maps out high density targets, and we'll find that this block probably has a lot of undocumented people in it. So let's do a raid of this apartment complex and detain 100 different people, most of whom are citizens, but we'll figure that out later. So there's this sort of heightened ability to engage in these sorts of policies domestically by working very closely with a lot of these leading tech industries and software developers. The ICE has its own internal facial recognition software that uses a big thing that's being used now is called Flock Safety, which is a license plate reader that sort of is able to map everyone's movements and through that their associations. Again, these are things that are being used right now for immigration enforcement, but I think it's very realistic to expect that in the next few years they're going to be deployed much more broadly on all kinds of people, particularly political dissidents, but anyone that is sort of undesirable to this techno-fascist capitalist project that we're unleashing.
Wow, yeah. Well, speaking of techno-fascist, and again, actually, let me pause a little bit, because how do we reconcile the fact that there is a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, and that the Democrats enable Republicans? Because I know this is going to be so unpopular for me to say, but I almost feel like right now where we're at, electoral politics are just one tool. And if we acknowledge that one is worse than the other, is the answer not to be organizing, be out in the streets? But when it comes to voting, do we just vote for the lesser evil because they will make it harder for us to be in the streets? And again, I'm not saying this in a way that we have Biden as president and then we're all able to kumbaya and free all the, political prisoners or stop imperialism from happening. But I do wonder, given how there is a substantive difference, and I know you have people in fact, Brad behind the scenes right here always likes to say he'd rather have his, he prefers the wolf to wolf in sheep's clothing. And yes, sure, there certainly is value in knowing there can be value in having such an overt enemy that your guard is up, right? And you talked about how I think people can be lulled into complacency when a Democrat's in power, partly because what Trump is saying and doing is so repulsive and revolting, you kind of can't stay at home. So I guess my question for you as a lawyer who's obviously very, I don't know how you would describe yourself, anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, how does one reconcile that with also kind of the reality of a difference between those two parties?
Yeah, I think it's, we can definitely approach voting and electoralism as, a harm management a strategic tool. I think it's definitely easier to pressure Democrats, and particularly progressive Democrats, than Republicans. We're seeing that very clearly. I'm not going to tell anyone to, completely disengage from the political sphere. But I do think we need to wrestle with the fact that, the system isn't broken. It was designed this way, right? And that essentially our economy is built not for, to encourage cooperation and the thriving of all people, but it's a system of resource extraction. And that everything our government is oriented towards right now is really built towards defending that. And Minneapolis, Chicago, these cities that are, really taking really brave and sophisticated action against ICE right now, I think are great examples of how and why we go beyond simply appealing to politicians. Because we've seen this sort of anemic response from, our leaders. We've also seen a fairly anemic response. There's great nonprofits out there that are, organizing people. But what people on the ground in New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, and elsewhere have been finding is that these nonprofits are largely concerned with sort of their, existential, their ability to operate safely. There's a lot of sort of top-down control going on there. They've been encouraging people, just to monitor ICE, but not intervene or, get in any trouble. And what people have found is that was just not cutting the mustard. And so a lot of these sort of huge signal groups that were, admin only, where only, the nonprofit directors can tell people what to do, have been sort of abandoned in lieu of more democratic groups where everyone can sort of talk in real time and engage with, the best ways to respond to these. And what's been built out of that is these incredibly sophisticated networks for, patrolling and basically conducting counter surveillance and ICE. Engaging in direct action that physically stops them from getting to their target by blocking roads or whatever else it might be. These are just really organic community responses. A lot of these threads started, to invite people to backyard barbecues and help find a lost cat. And they've been built out into these incredibly sophisticated and, fairly, I guess, militant, for lack of a better word, community organizations where they're saying, this is our home. We're going to defend our land from these, jackbooted invaders. And so I don't think it's necessarily that we have to choose one or the other, but I think there's a tendency to focus almost entirely on the leaders, on the politicians, on the nonprofits. And I think we really, as everyday people who are the most impacted by these policies, we don't give ourselves enough credit to have the intelligence to talk with our neighbors, to organize ourselves. And I think what we're seeing in Minneapolis right now is a great example of how possible that is.
Well, speaking of these kind of inspiring protests and movements, we actually have some footage of people fighting back in Minneapolis. Let's take a look at that clip.
Across the Twin Cities, a vast network of volunteers have mobilized to track federal agents.
Yeah, I'm not impeding. You guys are all here. I'm not impeding. Go back to your vehicle. I got you. Don't worry about me, bro. Let's do this. Drop your weapons. Let's do this. Get out. Go ahead.
The day after Good was shot, we joined Amanda Kohler and St. Paul City Council member Wajong Kim on an ICE-watching patrol.
Hey, this is Amanda and Wajong. We're heading from North End towards Midway, unless you need us elsewhere.
Right now, they're looking for cars that they think might belong to ICE.
Could I get a plate check, please? I look at cars very closely now.
If the license plate comes up on a database compiled by activists, they'll sound the alarm.
So that's inspiring. I hope these people going to get in trouble though now?
Theoretically, they shouldn't. They're not doing anything illegal. It's totally First Amendment protected activity that they're engaged with. There are, many people out there taking much bigger risks in terms of, putting their bodies on the line. But we've seen what happened to Renee Good and other people who have been accused of using their cars as some sort of violent weapon. So they're being very brave. But But what's, I think, the most inspiring about this is the way that the two activists in that clip, along with, literally thousands of their neighbors and community members, are finding each other, going to meetings, getting in the signal groups, getting themselves organized. Not everyone's going to have the ability to be a patroller like they are and drive around looking for ICE. But there are, all sorts of other roles. There are, people working as dispatch from their homes. There are people giving out whistles so that when ICE does show up, the community erupts in noise and people know to stay away. There's all sorts of clever tactics being deployed to essentially make ICE's jobs that much harder and protect people from being kidnapped and worse. So it's, I think this is really encouraging to see this happening.
Well, you're someone who we had you on before because you were working to defend students at Columbia who had their rights violated for basically legal protests, right, for Palestine. What is the connection between these tendencies, this kind of fascistic, I think it's not that hard to understand it, right? But you have this fascistic crackdown on protest when it comes to, Minneapolis, when it comes to ICE. Then you have this fascistic imperialism abroad in Venezuela. And then, of course, you have a support of a fascistic government in Israel. And then you have a fascistic crackdown on free speech here when it comes to speech that is pro-Palestine, critical of Israel, however you want to describe it.
Yeah, I think there's a direct connection to those things. And I said at the beginning of our conversation that immigration enforcement has sort of been a laboratory over the last 4 years for how to do fascism in the 21st century. Israeli policy towards Palestine has been, and America's involvement in those policies has been another one of those laboratories where essentially technologies are deployed, policies are deployed that would never be tolerated anywhere else. But you see it being used in the immigration space. You see it being used against people in Gaza and the West Bank. And it normalizes these things to the point where then they can begin to be deployed around the world and domestically. So certainly, I think you had someone on the other day talking about how the killing of Renee Good was essentially an IDF tactic of killing an innocent person and then blaming them and calling them the dangerous person.
Yeah, Anthony Aguilar, right? The former Green Beret special ops person who then went to Gaza, worked with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, as Aaron Maté calls it, the Gaza Holocaust Foundation, and then was a whistleblower because of the crimes he observed, including shooting people and an unarmed child.
Yeah, but I think for many of us who've been, very active towards, for Palestinian liberation and to the genocide, in addition to, just the baseline sort of moral duty to stand up for other people and people in Gaza, there is a sort of self-interested fear that what happens there comes back here. And, certainly the use of drones in Gaza as a form of constant terror, not just through the random shootings, but the noise that percolates the entire area as a form of essentially just constant warfare against people's psyches. And all those technologies then come back home, and now we're seeing the increased use of drones and other tech by militarized police forces here. I've seen those same drones being used to monitor pro-Palestine protesters here in New York City. So yeah, I think those are two of the main places that come to my mind as places, these sort of liminal spaces, these states of exception, where, the powers that be, quote unquote, which in this case are the political fascist and the techno-fascist, can get together and give each other a bunch of money and trot out a bunch of new toys and use it to terrorize a population until that population, expands and expands till it's all of us.
Right. Yeah, really frightening. You see Gavin Newsom, who I think is kind of the face of, he likes to pretend to be progressive. And what I find striking is, I'm going to show a really short clip of Gavin talking about ICE. But what's striking to me is that, or not striking, is that there was a clip of Gavin Newsom being so bullied and manhandled, as Keaton Weiss of Do Dissidents described it, by Ben Shapiro, that I literally thought that Ben Shapiro was interviewing Gavin Newsom, but it was actually Gavin Newsom interviewing Ben Shapiro. But let's take a look at something they say about ICE, and then I'm going to bring up what was said about genocide.
That's exactly what they do in California, and we have over 10,000 that I've cooperated with since I've been governor of California. We work very directly with ICE as it relates to CDCR, state prison. California has cooperated with more ICE transfers probably than any other state in the country. And I vetoed multiple pieces of legislation that have come from my legislature to stop the ability for the state of California to do that. So when it comes to the issues of violent criminals, when it comes to felons, people that are being released from the largest state system in the United States of America, California cooperates with ICE.
Okay, but why is it then? What makes it a sanctuary state?
Well, the broader sanctuary policies that are established, and we had a policy that was established under Governor Brown, SB 54. You have city sanctuary policies that go back quite literally to the time Ronald Reagan was governor, and as it relates to some of the issues in Central America, sort of the origin stories. But the bottom line, as it relates to those policies, this notion that federal law should be enforced by federal law.
All right, so you get the picture, but I mean, why is he being such a cuck here, like to Ben Shapiro and like showing off again? What is this like? Is he seeking Ben Shapiro's endorsement? I mean, I kind of jest, but I found this kind of striking. Like, I was less surprised that he was so embarrassingly soft on genocide and made it seem like there wasn't genocide.
Democrats have now been dragged into this conversation. Some dragged, some run with flags waving into the conversation.
This notion of genocide.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, look,
Israel did not commit a genocide in Gaza. There is no standard by which Israel committed a genocide in Gaza, just on a factual level.
Just as a legal and factual level.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is your opinion of this?
My opinion is, I understand the tendency for people to make that, to assert that.
Why?
On the basis of the images and the proportionality as
Ugly
it relates
shit doesn't
to
mean genocide.
No. And by the way, I agree with you.
And international and proportionality doesn't mean that if you kill my child and I then kill 7 criminals, that I've been disproportionate.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think but I understand that tendency on the basis of trying to reconcile the proportionate nature of how the war was ultimately conducted. And the devastation.
I have a question. Why do you feel the need to create a permission structure for that sort of stuff? I mean, meaning it's not true.
Yeah.
Why not just say it's not true?
Yeah. Look, I don't know the definition, or I don't know the legal threshold. That's not my opinion. So I don't share that opinion as it relates to genocide. I do not agree with that notion. I'm crystal clear about Hamas.
But the point is that
crystal clear about Hamas.
Right, but the point is that I think,
and I'm also crystal clear in my love for Israel.
We can just say, moving forward, anyone who says there is not a genocide in Gaza is either ignorant or lying, because it's established, the science is in on that. But that was less surprising, although disgusting, to watch him grovel and be like, oh, it's not genocide, but I get why people are so emotional about it. It's like, no, actually, it's not emotional. I mean, you should be emotional about genocide because it's genocide, but it's also literally just like there are established criteria for it. But this was more surprising because I'm used to Democrats pretending to be pro-immigrant, even while they're not. So what are your thoughts on that?
Particularly in California. But yeah. I mean, I can't imagine what his political calculations are right here. I'm sure he's got grand aspirations and is trying to race farther and farther to the center. It's probably why he went to meet with Ben Shapiro at all. But, there's nothing really that shocking about what he said there to me, which is, that the Democrats largely are, in bed with ICE and these sorts of policies. And in fact, the system as we've constructed it sort of depends on this interplay between the good cop and the bad cop. Governor Newsom is not going to be the person to, put a body on the line in defense of people, that we're not impacted that way. But also it's so troubling to me when people talk about the violent criminals. We have procedures for that. It's called the criminal justice system. Doesn't work very well, but that's what's meant to deal with violent crime.
Should I tell him, Brad? Should I say we can't hear you? Let me text him.
Hey, are you back?
Oh, great. Okay. I don't want to delay you though. So, okay.
Really, I mean, the point I was trying to make is, that there's actually like incentives in our immigration system that, I mean, the idea that this is meant to attack, to, you know, go after the violent criminals obviously is a canard, but, you know, it often backfires. You know, so I have a client right now who is a witness to an attempted murder by a, you know, white person who was hopped up on drugs. The client was picked up and he's been held in detention for months now, facing a removal. And the district attorney in this attempted murder case is asking for him to be released so that he can testify. And ICE is just flatly refusing to cooperate, you know, will not respond. And I see things like this all the time, right? Where it's like, if you're actually interested in going after violent criminals, you know, look in the mirror, not just at ICE itself, but, you know, there's a lot of dangerous people out here. And it's not, you know, the 20-year-old undocumented kid who came here, you know, for hope of a better life.
Yeah, that's really, I feel like, I mean, I know obviously I'm a leftist, but I do feel like it's so important to reach people who aren't necessarily our political allies. And I do think that it's important to tell those stories. I mean, it's important for everyone, but I do feel like those are really useful for reaching people who are like pro law and order. Like if they really care about that stuff, they should not actually support this, like these brown shirts.
Right. And when in fact, like, yeah, we have immigration laws, we have humanitarian immigration laws that are actually meant to protect people to come forward to report crimes. And when we have these sorts of policies, actually, we invite violent crime because it can be engaged against undocumented people and they're going to be too afraid to speak up or file a report or anything like that. And so I think that actually kind of precisely shows, you know, what the sort of contradiction is here of you're not interested in targeting violent criminals, you're interested in targeting people of color, right? And if those two are in conflict, they're always going to target the person of color. Yeah.
That's a very important cautionary tale. Well, James, thank you so much. I especially appreciate it because you do such important work and I know how busy you are, but please do come back. We learned a lot from this.
I'd love that. Thank you for having me.
Great.
Pleasure, Katie.
Thank
Take care.
That was James Carlson. Fascinating interview. So important. And again, please do like the stream if you haven't already. And please do subscribe so you don't miss any additional live streams that we're doing. And to do that, you hit subscribe and then you press the bell. And for this week's Patreon, we are giving you the full interview that we did with Professor Mohammad Marandi, who joined us from Iran. And we're giving you the full interview that we did with Pakistani analyst and exile, Dr. Moeed Pirzada, who's just been sentenced in absentia to multiple life terms of prison in Pakistan. And he was also the victim of a suspicious arson attack at his home in Washington, D.C. And of course, we also talk about the latest in Imran Khan's case and persecution and imprisonment. And again, you can find that all at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And here is a sneak preview of the interview that we do with Mohammad Marandi. And again, you'll find the rest of it on Patreon. Dr. Marandi, there's been so much misinformation about the protests that are happening in Tehran. So much misinformation in the Western media about those. The Western media has been saying hundreds of thousands of peaceful protesters have been getting gunned down. Even some progressive leftist media spaces are reporting that uncritically, repeating that. As someone in Tehran, can you please sort out the truth from fiction, fact from fiction?
Well, now I'm also hearing, before I came on the show, I read that they're now saying that they've used chemical weapons. So in a couple of days, probably it'll be nuclear weapons, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. What happened basically, Katie, was that, first of all, there's nothing going on now in the country. The riots, the protests, everything, that ended a week ago. Last Saturday, it fizzled out. And since Sunday, there's been nothing. So it's been almost a week where everything's been quiet. Or literally a week, because Saturday, nothing really important happened. The week before, we had a sudden fall in the Iranian currency. And the United States apparently put pressure on neighboring countries and entities to not to cooperate with Iran with regards to currency exchange. And that led to this sudden drop, 30 to 40%. I don't know the exact amount. And that led to protests the next day because business people, largely, they were protesting, and shop owners. A couple of thousand, I think, in Tehran. I don't know the numbers. And maybe a couple of thousand in other cities too, 2 or 3 other cities.
And again, to get that full interview, go to patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Don't forget to subscribe because we are doing these great bonus additional live streams that you will not want to miss. And also, so to make sure that you access that, hit subscribe and then the bell. Do you like the stream if you haven't already? Do become Patreon supporters, and see you next Tuesday, if not before. Bye, everyone.